Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Echoes podcast. I'm Jessica Smetana. He's Mike Golic Jr. We have a huge show today reacting to the college football playoff snub of Notre Dame, the bowl opt-out. And so we're going to get right into it with an interview with Notre Dame athletic director Pete Bevacqua.
All right, very excited to welcome in, albeit we wish we're under more celebratory circumstances. Notre Dame athletic director Pete Bevacqua, kind enough to give us some time today. Pete, I guess now that you've had some time to sit further and digest everything that happened on Sunday and that final rankings, the initial hurt, all of the feelings, what are you left with now as you kind of sit here with all this in the past?
Yeah, I would tell you, Mike, feel worse today than I did yesterday, and I think it's going to feel worse as each day goes by because we still don't have any good answers. And that's what frustrates us. And I want to be clear about that. It's nothing. Miami's a great team. Alabama is a really good team. You had other teams like Texas and Vanderbilt, BYU. So it's not a question of like that team got in and we didn't. It's what we're frustrated by is the process. And if you think about it, and you both follow Notre Dame football so closely, obviously. When you go back to that first CFP ranking, we were 10th. Miami was 18th. We were both 6-2, and they had beaten us. And we're not hiding from that. We lost our first two games against two really good teams by a total of 4 points. But then everything since that first ranking, we took care of business, as did Miami. And all of a sudden, we wake up several weeks later and we're on the outside looking in, even having dominated the remainder of our schedule and winning those games by, over an average of 30 points. And then you think to Tuesday's rankings, and for some reason that I just can't fathom, we fall behind Alabama because we went to Stanford, played what felt like in the middle of the night and dominated that game. Alabama beats an Auburn team that's not having a good year, that's making a coaching change, and we hear rationale like, well, they went for it on fourth down and they got out to an early lead. And we were just kind of left, scratching our heads. Like, what have we done wrong that all of a sudden we're the only ones going in the wrong direction? And so we're like, what's the point of these rankings? I said to someone earlier, like, this is serious to us and our student athletes and our coaches. This isn't musical chairs at some birthday party when you were a kid. Like this has to mean something. And Marcus got up there yesterday after the team found out watching the selection show. And for a guy who always has all the answers and can communicate with the team better than anybody I've ever seen, he told them, he's like, I don't know what just happened. We don't have any answers. And Mike, we still don't have any answers that make any sense to us.
So you're someone who has a television background, obviously, but also is now a college administrator and athletic director. So in your opinion, how much of a factor do you think the network conference partnerships play into the ultimate rankings? Because I think a lot of fans watching Alabama lose by 3 touchdowns in the SEC championship game are blaming SEC bias on the committee leaving them in, or are blaming the fact that the ACC didn't have a strong conference champion. So the committee felt obligated to put an ACC team in the final field of 12.
Yeah, it's a good question, Jess. I mean, I'm not in that room, so I don't know. I mean, I think the conferences certainly look out for the teams in their conference. And quite frankly, Jess, I get that, right? I mean, as you know, we're an independent. We love being independent in football. As I've said to anybody who will listen, it's part of what makes Notre Dame. It's part of our DNA. But sometimes you're out there, you're fighting all alone, right? You don't have somebody, looking out for you in those types of rooms. And, I think we certainly felt that this year. Somebody asked me the question yesterday, like, well, is that going to change Notre Dame's approach to being independent? And my answer was no, it just makes us want to be independent even more. And, I know it motivates Marcus too. He's fired up and frustrated and angry and, ready to get going and thinking about 26 already.
Speaking of angry, I heard you on the Dan Patrick Show Monday say that the ACC relationship is strained now. One of the reasons I imagine is because they have been campaigning publicly to compare Miami and Notre Dame head to head over the past several weeks. Been playing the Miami Notre Dame game on repeat on the ACC network. But can you talk a little bit about what a strained relationship with the ACC actually entails from where you're sitting?
Yeah, Jess, we have great respect for those universities in the ACC. And so many people tried to pit us against Miami, and I get it, right? That's how these things shake out. And I have nothing but respect for Miami, the school, the program, their athletic director, Dan Radakovich, a wonderful guy, a good friend. And even if at Miami had gone on a social media campaign against us and said, "Hey, we beat Notre Dame, we deserve to be ahead of them," I get that. That's fine and fair. But that the conference chose to do that in football, we're certainly one of, if not their most important business partner. They're the home of 600 or so of our student athletes. That didn't sit well with us, and we let that be known to the ACC. That's their decision. They have that decision to make. That's totally their right to make the decision they made. But they can't think it's not going to have consequences and repercussions on how this university feels about the conference. That got our attention and didn't sit well, not just with me, but people who are far more important at this university than I am.
Would that ever prompt you guys to look at another conference as a potentially a partner in place of the ACC in the future?
Mike, we're not thinking about that right now. We're still, we got still kind of grieving here, if you will, with the decision that was made yesterday and really focused on those 100. And you've been a part of the Notre Dame football team. You can imagine what they're going through. You put all this effort and hard work in, as does every other team around the country. I'm not saying, oh, that only happens at Notre Dame, but nobody had the rug pulled out from them like we did yesterday. I think even a great BYU team, I don't think they were surprised, right? I mean, they had a great year, lost to a really good Texas Tech team twice. But, we sat in that room yesterday saying, okay, are we going to be 9 or 10? Not, hey, football's over for the season.
Well, speaking of football being over for the season, obviously one of the other dominoes to fall Sunday was the decision to opt out of the bowl game. I've heard you say that this was a captain's decision on the football team. They decided it was more important for them to just, not go back out onto the field a different team in a potential bowl game with the number of opt-outs that would have probably, happened for Notre Dame if they were playing in, let's say, the Pop-Tart Bowl, which is what was reported. But can you talk a little bit more about, was this a team vote? Was this, democratic? Did the captains just sort of decide with Marcus Freeman? Did you have any input in it? How does that decision ultimately get made?
Yeah, I spent most of the day yesterday with Marcus in his office. I was there with me and Ron Powless and Kitty Lonergan on our team. And what's kind of cruel about all of this is just when you find out you're left in the dark and left on the outside looking in to play for a national championship, you start to get calls about bowl games. I mean, it couldn't be a worse issue in terms of timing. And as I said to Marcus, I said, Marcus, what do you want to do? I had a point of view. He had a point of view. To his credit, and he places so much importance on the perspective of the team captains. And you saw that. You saw that in the Peacock documentary last year. You'll see that again this year. I mean, he really takes what they say to heart and really relies on them. And that's why they're leaders on this team. So he talked to them. Where are your heads? What's the feeling of the team? Had several conversations. Called a couple of key underclassmen. So it's not just the captains, and the unanimous feeling that was reported back is, listen, we're all about competition. We're all about playing football, but this team is so close and did so much this year after overcoming those, starting off 0-2 and then rallying to show such dominance in those 10 games. It just didn't feel right to go take that field again without the full team intact. And think about somebody like Jeremiah Love, one of the most electrifying college players I've ever seen. We can't sit there and tell Jeremiah he should play in that bowl game. That's not fair to him. or to his future, his unbelievable future that he has. Notre Dame's lived through this in the past, and that it just didn't feel right. And our captains didn't want to do it. And Marcus agreed. Ultimately, it's Marcus's decision, but the impact and the contributions from the captains meant a lot. So, now they'll prepare for exams that are next week and then get some much needed time and rest at home with their family and friends for Christmas and New Year's. And we'll come back here and start thinking about winning a national championship in 26.
Was there any thought that this is a way to stick it to ESPN to not participate in their exhibition bowl game because they have spent the last few weeks just permanently hammering the college football playoff debate, even in the middle of Notre Dame games that were in the middle of the night, like you mentioned?
Yeah, I would tell you we weren't happy about the fact that they seem to be continuously reporting our eulogy, particularly on Saturday. But that didn't factor into it. We were solely concerned by what was best for the kids, the student athletes on the team, the guys in that locker room, and nobody knows what they're feeling, what the sentiment is better than the captains of this team. And that's who Marcus went to. This wasn't a business decision or let's kind of show everybody this is, we're not going to kind of be trotted out like a show pony for television ratings. This was about the guys on our team, the guys in that locker room, 100%.
You mentioned eyes on next year, Notre Dame's, fierce loyalty to its independence and how core that is to the identity. But, you talked about the schedule, having a front loaded with the two most, high impact, high leverage games of the season at the beginning of the year. Is there any talk or thought of needing to reexamine what Notre Dame does in terms of scheduling, kind of with this result in mind?
Yeah, scheduling's tricky, Mike, right? And next year we open up in Lambeau against Wisconsin on a Sunday night. That's going to be a blast. I think that's going to be a wonderful game. Shamrock Series game. Really looking forward to that. But when you think about the reality of the college football scheduling, particularly with the increase in conference games in the Big Ten and the SEC, and the SEC going to 9. I think we need to prepare ourselves for difficult, very competitive Septembers. So if you look into the future, you see that we play teams like Texas and Alabama in September. I think that's going to be part of a new reality here as we enter into the future, and we got to be prepared for that. And we was this year played a really good Miami team at Miami with a first time quarterback who I couldn't be more excited about, CJ Carr. And the team that got on the plane after the Stanford game is a much different team than the team that got off the plane in Miami to play Miami. Now, that's not an excuse. That's just the maturation and development of this team over the course of a season. But I would be misleading if I said I don't think we're going to continue to have some really challenging games in September and throughout the rest of the season.
Speaking of which, do you have any update on where it stands currently with scheduling the USC game, which, obviously is something very important to Notre Dame fans and USC fans alike?
Yeah, we've had really good positive conversations with USC and Jen Cohen, their AD. I'm hopeful, Jess, that we'll get something done here in short order. I think we'll do a short-term extension, and then, quite frankly, there might be a gap or two in that series, and then pick it back up. But I can certainly speak for Notre Dame, and I can pretty much speak and confidently speak for USC. Both schools want to keep this going. They have to be obviously very aware of kind of, our schedule. We have to be aware of their schedule. We both have to be aware of the new reality in college football. But I've had great conversations with Jen Cohen, and we're both committed, and Notre Dame and USC are both committed to getting something done. It's not done yet, but I feel really good about it.
All right. Well, I think that's great news to a lot of people that certainly love and care about that rivalry, present company included in that. Pete, I'd say one of the last ones for me here is, Marcus Freeman was someone that attracted a lot of outside attention this season as jobs came open around college football. We even saw reports lately about, the respect he has from the Mara family inside the New York Giants organization, as the NFL certainly been a place that Marcus has been talked about, have you and Marcus talked at all about this? Like, how comfortable are you in the fact that Notre Dame's head coach is going to be around here still for a good long time?
Yeah, we couldn't be more pleased that Marcus Freeman is the head coach at Notre Dame. He is the perfect coach for this university, and the job he has done, on the field, off the field. As I like to say, Mike, he's more than our football coach, and being a football coach at Notre Dame is not easy. Even saying that, he's more than that. He and his family, Joanna, the kids, have become such a fixture here at Notre Dame. I mean, you go to a hockey game and there's Marcus and one of his kids and Joanna. You go to a women's basketball game, a men's basketball game, a soccer game. He's such a part of the fabric of Notre Dame. I know he's happy here. He has such alignment at this university. When you think about Father Bob Dowd, our president, our chair, John Viemeyer, certainly me, we have a wonderful relationship. 35 years now with NBC. We have the Shields Family Hall going up, right underneath his office. We have such an unbelievable recruiting class that was going to be coming in here. I mean, we're firing on all cylinders right now. I never for a second take the fact that he's here as our coach for granted. We need to make sure that he understands that he's valued, that he has our full support, and that Marcus Freeman deserves to be among the highest paid coaches in college football each and every year, because he's earned it, because he's that good. And he's not only great preparing our team, but he's great representing everything Notre Dame stands for. That's my obligation, my responsibility, and it's one I take very, very seriously.
Last question from me. I was wondering if you could just shed a little bit of light on the MOU that Ross Dellinger had reported on yesterday, that says that in the event Notre Dame finishes in the top 12 in the final college football playoff ranking, they would be included in the playoff. Can you just explain what exactly that means?
Yeah, and I don't want to go into too much detail on the MOU, but it's out there and it's been reported. Going forward in these next 6 years of the CFP and the extension with ESPN, we negotiated the fact that if we're 12 or better, we're guaranteed in. We don't get an automatic qualifier. We have to prove it on the field. We still have to get to that point, 12 or better, but it would avoid something like what happened this year.
Is there a scenario where if the powers that be do not believe Notre Dame should be in the playoff because of a, SEC championship game loser getting the last spot, or Miami getting the last spot, where they could just then perhaps like rank BYU ahead of Notre Dame and drop Notre Dame down to 13th just to exclude them anyways?
Well, I would never say never, but it's a memorandum of understanding. It's not a memorandum of, sort of understanding. So hopefully we're protected there.
Certainly, you, us, and Irish fans everywhere definitely agree with that sentiment. Pete, we know it's been a wild 24, 48 hours here, so we appreciate you giving us some time in the wake of that here. Enjoy, whatever time you can coming up this holiday season with your family and loved ones, and hopefully we'll all on to a strong 2026 for Notre Dame football and the rest of the athletics programs.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Jess. Have a great Christmas if I don't see you both before that. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Merry Christmas. We really appreciate it.
College football not feeling as juicy as it once did? Let me put you onto something that'll shake up your Saturday and every other day of the week.
Because now that Wendy's has crispy chicken tendies and a powerhouse lineup of new sauces, it's time you transfer to the hottest team in the league.
That's right, Team Tendies. Wendy's Tendies. They're making their undeniable rookie season one for the books. Enjoy first-string flavor from some 5-star recruits. Rep your new favorite team everywhere you go, but make sure to cheer with your mouth closed.
Take it to the end zone of savory sauces like honey barbecue, creamy ranch, and the new Wendy's signature sauce to experience a total taste bud blitz of flavor. It's time to join a team that won't upset you with an upset.
Taste the phenom that's gracing the gridiron with its juicy, crispy, and tendery tendencies. Don't fumble the bag. Commit to Team Tendies and call the most delicious plays in the playbook.
All right, huddle up, guys. Tendies on 3. Tendies on 3. 1, 2, 3, Tendies! Let's do this. Wendy's Chicken Tendies, now at participating U.S. Wendy's.
Support for the Echoes comes from Google. We heard commentators talk about the spread offense all the time, but what if you don't know exactly what that means or what makes it different from other offensive schemes?
You can keep wondering or ask your friends and hope they know what they're talking about. or you can use AI mode in Google search.
You can just type, help me understand what a spread option offense is and why a football team would choose to run it. Yep, you can ask all of that in one search, and you'll get an organized and helpful AI-powered response with everything you need to know.
But it doesn't end there. Let's say you want to keep going deeper. With AI mode, you don't have to start a whole new search. You can just ask direct follow-ups like, break down how it compares to the pro style offense based on overall philosophy, types of formations used, and pace. AI mode is great at these types of comparisons, giving you side-by-side analysis and helping you get the full story from one question to the next. So, if you don't just want to watch the game, but really want to understand it, you can just ask Google. All right, welcome back. Mike Golic Jr., Jessica Smetana. Thanks to Pete Bevacqua for stopping by here at the Echoes. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review for more great stuff like that at the Echoes ND Pod. I'm sure plenty of those clips will be making their way out, since obviously Pete's voice carries a lot of weight, not only around Notre Dame, but around the world of college football that got a big shakeup this weekend. So we had Pete as kind of a buffer while we start to process a lot of these complex feelings coming off this weekend, Jess, because the last time we were all here together talking about the Notre Dame victory against Stanford, where we stress watched a second half from hell in the middle of the night on the ACC network or whatever it was on. It gave way to what we thought was going to be a pretty, I won't say cut and dry, because going into championship weekend, you and I had texted a lot. I had texted with a lot of my Notre Dame friends and former teammates about kind of what Notre Dame thought it needed to happen going into that weekend. But going into the final weekend, Notre Dame ranked 10th, one spot behind 9th-ranked Alabama, one spot ahead of 11th-ranked BYU, with that buffer, as it turns out, that was highly necessary in between them and Miami for the debate.
Because they said
that
so,
went
yeah.
on. Because
Right,
they said
I mean,
so. So, yeah, I guess, Jess, what was your biggest takeaway from what we saw from that Sunday selection show that's now lit all of our hair on fire, what I had left?
Right. Well, let's go back to last Tuesday, because we recorded our episode Monday and Notre Dame was still 9. On Tuesday, Alabama Notre Dame flipped. And that was when I started to get a little bit of a unpleasant feeling about where this was all heading, Mike, because Notre Dame and Alabama both played the last game of the season against pretty bad football teams, to be honest. Auburn fired their coach this season, 5-7. And the justification for flipping them was that Auburn went for it on 4th down, and it was super gutsy. And meanwhile, Notre Dame just stomped the crap out of Stanford, was leading by 5 touchdowns at halftime. And we had to
fake
listen.
punt, which was super gutsy.
Had a fake punt, which was awesome. Yeah, I would call that gutsier than having to resort to last minute 4th down calls against a team that has 5 wins on the season. 5 not very good wins, as I should also mention. So the comparison there was when I was like, what I don't understand this rationale. But then the committee also was like, well, Notre Dame and Alabama that was like the toughest call. It wasn't Notre Dame and Miami. Notre Dame and Alabama was the toughest comparison in the room. So it was really by a hair that Alabama got put ahead. So then I was like, okay, I guess that's positive. Mike, the other thing that I want to mention is how confident the betting markets were in Notre Dame making the playoff, how confident the ESPN predictor percentages were on Saturday that Notre Dame would get in, which I really don't understand how they calculate that. And I don't think we should take too much stock into it. But if you are someone who's very cynical about this entire thing and believes that this is a made for television ranking show and ranking process that is just meant to deliver maximum drama during the show on Saturday, then I can't argue with you this year. I really can't argue with you after all of that, after waiting until the last show to flip Notre Dame and Miami, after waiting till the second to last to flip Alabama and Notre Dame, despite the fact that Notre Dame has just continued to kick ass 10 games in a row. They've done everything that you would think they needed to do since the first ranking came out, and they were pretty comfortably in the field. So I can't argue with anyone who's feeling ultra cynical. And obviously we asked Pete Bevacqua about if he thought that there's SEC bias or ACC bias in play. And I can't argue with any fan that believes that that is the case this year when you have an Alabama team with 3 losses, including a non-competitive game against Georgia in this SEC championship game, and a week 1 loss to Florida State that was also not good, not competitive, not as close as Notre Dame and Miami's game was, Mike, making the field ahead of Notre Dame. So overall, just like Pete Bevacqua, and I'm sure the players and Marcus Freeman feel, I'm very disappointed, not by just the results, because, we always knew if Notre Dame started off 0-2, this was a potential outcome. But I am very frustrated and disappointed by the process, because it has made the last month of college football feel ultra miserable, just having to constantly listen into the like rehashing of the playoff discourse, even in the middle of Notre Dame games, which I mean, I'm not here to listen to that. Just call the game. Tell me about Rick Meyer's son, Mike. But I mean, it's just been a really disappointing finale to a dominant 10-game win streak, and I hate that for the football players on the team.
Yeah, we'll get to the specifics of how things ended too, and that decision to opt out of the bowl game that we talked about. But I think you're right. This kind of laid bare what I had felt for the last month, which is, and listen, like I'm not the only one that said it. Nicole Auerbach wrote about it. You even had Kirk Herbstreit on the network saying we need to get rid of these Tuesday night shows. They're not helping this. Like the calls coming from inside the house, everyone sees this for what it is. I know it's baked into the contract that ESPN and the CFP have that there have to be at least 6 of those ranking shows, including the final release going forward. But at the very, like, let's put it, best case scenario, they would do away with that because in addition to leading people on in a way that proved ultimately false and logically inconsistent, it also puts the committee in a spot where they're forced to go out here every week, kind of make this up on their own and then make this up on the fly, go and explain it in a way that boxes them into these places that they tried to wiggle out of at the end and wound up looking logically inconsistent. I said for Notre Dame and Miami, both would be justifiably enraged had their teams been left out. And for Alabama, you could even point to the wins on their schedule, the resume and all those things, and understand how they believed, hey, Notre Dame never should have been ranked above them to begin with in the CFP when we did those rankings weeks and weeks ago. So at the very least, what we've learned is you don't need to take stock in those anymore. Like watching them is worthless. It is utterly,
Yeah.
and I say that as someone that like full participant, like I've done Tuesday reaction shows. I've done Tuesday reaction shows for ESPN. Like I've been in the machine and I've done that. And what the process showed us this year is it is utterly useless in terms of the one thing we thought it might be good for, right? Like every Tuesday, I'm like, hey, at the very least, we get to learn a little bit about what the committee's thinking. And what we learned is none of it matters until the last one. None of the thinking or thought process is justified until that last ranking where they're going to do what they should do all along, which is wait till the end, consider the body of work, and then make the decision that they made, which relative to Notre Dame and Miami, I understand. At the end of the season, that is a
I don't think anyone's
perfectly
arguing
defensible
that
position. Yeah.
I think that's why it's process over result that is very disappointing, and I think like just unfortunate for the players to have to deal with, Mike. But I think I would add that like I don't take stock in the ranking shows generally. I didn't even watch any of them live until last Tuesday, the penultimate one, I guess. But it's really hard as a fan to opt out of that discourse, and I think that's another thing that sucks. Like we can sit here and say like just don't pay attention to the shows next year, but constantly it's being relitigated during actual football games over and over. It is impossible to watch the games from even the first week of the season onward without having to constantly hear about the playoff committee and ultimately what the rankings are midway through the season. So I don't know how you avoid that as a fan. Like that's just the reality that we're in unless something changes, and I don't picture it changing.
No, I don't, but yeah, you're right. It's difficult. And honestly, to your point, I worry about it more from the player standpoint. Like that's the real rub here is those guys towards the end of this season were told by this committee, hey, we think you're better. We think you're in the field, especially as it's compared to this one team. Like the notion of head to head only mattering when the team's touched to me is a farce. Like that is laughable.
It's complete nonsense. It really is just absolutely made up. Like it's all made up. Obviously it's made up that the conference championship results don't matter for some conferences but do matter for other conferences, of course, too. And I do want to just reiterate that because the Notre Dame should join a conference chorus is just like if it's the one thing you know about Notre Dame, you will say it at one point when you hear something that happened to Notre Dame. So I understand it's like a reflex for people, but BYU famously was independent for a long time, joined a conference, played won 11 games, more games than multiple teams that got into the field, lost to Texas Tech. And I think BYU's schedule was not strong enough, and they also were uncompetitive to Texas Tech twice this season, which doesn't help. But they're in a conference, and they lost the conference championship game, and they're out of the playoff. Alabama's in a conference. They lost the conference championship game by 3 touchdowns. They're in the playoff. Duke and Virginia played for a conference championship game this past weekend. Neither of them are in the playoff. You could have even there's like the whole ACC conspiracy side of it too, that, once Duke won, the committee wasn't going to leave out a Power 4 conference member. That I don't necessarily know if I subscribe to that, but it's definitely possible. It's definitely a possibility. And that's where the other unfortunate thing comes into play, which is that the Miami Hurricanes were a really good football team to start the year. They played some pretty mediocre games in the middle of the season. And so they were good enough to win 10 games, but not good enough to just fully fall out of the top 15 at any point, which is the exact middle ground where it screwed over Notre Dame. Because had Miami just gone 11-1 and been firmly in the field, or, played for the ACC championship game.
I was going to say, that's what this really comes down
right,
to, is when we look at the larger picture around college football, a lot of people are going to take the time here to demonize a few different things. And you're right, BYU's got a hell of a gripe, like higher strength of resume than Notre Dame, Alabama, or Miami, higher strength of schedule than Notre Dame and Miami, loses 2 times to the same top 4 team, and somehow gets dropped down here in a way that Alabama's recused from. Would be maddening if I was a BYU fan, and is maddening from the team that apparently needed them as a buffer as well. But a lot of people are going to also use this, right, like what you just said, to, hey, we got 2 group of 5 teams in here now. Seems like a flawed process. Like, the flawed process is how the ACC picked its conference champions this year. Like, that's the thing, and that's like the easiest fix to me going forward that seems to, I think, satisfy most of the things that ended up becoming like the bugs in the machinery this season that produced this result. Like, I don't want to turn into the guy that's saying lock the group of 5 out of the college football playoff. I like the group of 5. Life's hard enough for them right now, and the playoff's going to expand going forward.
I want to also say, I think that ultimately hurts Notre Dame, because they are keeping this from becoming just the SEC Big Ten Invitational by their participation being part of the formula. But go on.
Wait, what do you mean?
I mean, like, if we completely eliminate the group of 5 requirement, and we just make this like the 4 power conferences get 4 automatic bids or whatever, like I think Notre Dame being part of a at-large field that includes teams like James Madison, or, really good teams like Tulane, I think that generally like helps open it up, so that this doesn't become a playoff format where there's 4 automatic qualifiers for the Big Ten and like 4 for the SEC, and then like, 2 for the Big 12, 2 for the ACC. I think that this is actually probably better for Notre Dame, right? Like, there's like an implied inclusivity there. I mean, I could be wrong. I just, whatever. I'm spitballing.
There is. I just, like, that's one of those, like, for the good of the sport, like that level of inclusivity that, we understand is probably where this is all going anyway. Like, the TV deals come up in 2030. We're probably due for the big reorg then. Like, I saw everyone quote tweeting and retweeting, when Notre Dame opted out of the bowl game, The League, that book about the English Premier League, that is one of the better sports books I've ever read, and one that feels prescriptive for where college football will eventually go, given the similarities structurally between the two. But that's what everyone thinks is going to happen, is college football's version of the English Premier League is eventually going to be born, and then it'll really carve those teams out of it. And so I don't want to usher in that day any sooner than it comes, even though that in this case, like, it is hard to watch as a Notre Dame fan that Tulane and James Madison are going to go out there and have the opportunity to do this when you're not. But like, them's the breaks. And that still ultimately comes back to, like, maybe it's the player brain in me, but I also think it's the reality we knew going into this season. Like, for Notre Dame, the way it happened sucks. The process over result, like we said over and over again. The bottom line is, with Notre Dame's schedule laid out, we knew before the season you probably had to split with Miami and Texas A&M, and didn't. And like, that's ultimately the thing that was still in their control. Didn't happen. They did everything they could to try and get back to that point after that and try and rectify it. But ultimately, we knew those were incredibly high leverage games. And that's difficult to do at the beginning of your season, to have those moments at the beginning of the year when you're not who you're going to be in November, by design, the way every football team grows every year. And so ultimately, we kind of knew, like, and when everyone talked about would this spur Notre Dame into joining a conference, like I always said, 11-1 Notre Dame getting left out would be the reckoning. 10-2 Notre Dame getting left out in the way this happened, to me, was always something that was a possibility given what we know about college football.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, just to like further reiterate, I don't think this is like a Notre Dame needs to join a conference problem. I think they're firmly in the field if they beat Texas A&M and are 11-1. And that was a 1-point game. And like you said, when you don't win your conference, if you're an Alabama or Miami, or if you don't have a really strong resume, which Notre Dame had a really good resume. It wasn't like the strongest resume because, USC, they're good, but they're not they're not like a difference maker in this argument, I guess, for a lot of people. I even thought like when Boise State won the Mountain West Friday, like maybe that would help a little bit because Notre Dame played 2 G5 teams that were really good in their conferences this year. But anyways, I digress. The point is, yeah, like they probably need to be an 11 or 12 win team to be a lock in the playoff, and may even have been hosting a game had they beaten Texas A&M. So that's what happens when you lose 2 games in a season. And I think it's just the way that this happened led to the bowl game opt out, which I really want to talk about because I have seen so much pearl clutching over Notre Dame opting out of the Pop-Tart Bowl, Mike, that I feel like I'm going a little insane. And I want to say as a fan, I'm super disappointed we won't get to see Notre Dame play a extra game this year, a 13th game. Like the season's over and it sucks that that's how it ended, ended at 2 a.m. in Palo Alto with like 4 people in the stands. But I can't in good conscience make an argument for these players to put their bodies on the line in this type of game for purely entertainment purposes. I love bowl games. Like these games are so much fun to watch. But at the same time, I was at the 2015 Fiesta Bowl, Mike. I saw Jalen Smith's knee get blown out against Ohio State, and I never want to see that again, frankly. So I just cannot in good conscience argue for Notre Dame to play in this game if the players do not want to do it, which by all accounts and by what Pete Bevacqua told us earlier, the players did not feel like they wanted to do it. So, okay.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing to me. And like I saw, again, the internet's largely not real anymore, but in general, like I think the reaction that we saw is just largely kind of tied to the same thing that's always been the hang up for a lot of people in Notre Dame is no one likes different. Like no one likes someone that does something they feel like they can't or wouldn't do themselves. But more often than not, it's can't. And that's why the independence bothers a lot of people because they feel like Notre Dame is playing by a different set of rules. And in this case here, Notre Dame made a decision for them. Like I kind of laughed at the notion that everyone was bringing up like, oh, Notre Dame's taking its ball and going home. That implies that the game stops because Notre Dame's leaving.
Right.
Notre Dame didn't tell anyone else they couldn't play in bowl games, shouldn't play in bowl games. The Pop-Tart Bowl is still going to happen. Georgia Tech and BYU are going to go play a game. So this notion that like Notre Dame just flipped the table because they were out, like no, they recused themselves. They made a decision
they're
for
just
them.
opting out of a game that doesn't ultimately matter and no one will even talk about once. Like people will wake up on December 28th and no longer be talking about the Pop-Tart Bowl. Like I can say that confidently because I've watched multiple of them and forgot until last night who even played in it last year. Iowa State, congratulations. But Mike, I'm with you. They're also not even the only team opting out of bowl games. Like teams opt out of bowl games for injury reasons, coaching change reasons, like whatever reasons. Notre Dame was probably going to have a ton of players opt out of this. And I understand that rationale from the players that, you played 12 games this season with your team. This team would have been different because you would have been missing a big handful of those guys. And we don't exactly know which players those are, but I would venture to guess it includes Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. It includes Eli Raridan. It includes Emil Wagner. There's a lot of players on this team that wouldn't have played in the game. And so I can't really argue against the team deciding this as a team. If this was Pete Bevacqua deciding as athletic director, screw you, ESPN, we're not playing in your stupid bowl game. We're going to be petty about it. Then I probably would react differently. But as he just told us, I believe him. I don't think that was actually a consideration.
I can say Marcus Freeman was openly talking about letting Jeremiah Love decide whether or not he was going to go back in the Stanford game after that rib injury. Like, I think this coaching staff has kind of showed you it takes it takes the player voice into account. Like, I can tell you, I've been through this process. Like in 2009, now albeit different circumstances. Like you brought up, Iowa State, Kansas State. Like coaching change to me, like different circumstance. You're going to go through like 15 bowl practices with a bunch of people that aren't going to be there and get ready to learn. Like you're going to have different coaches. You're going to learn different techniques. You're going to do things a completely different way come January of this year if you're those teams. So to me, it's like a point of diminished returns when it comes to the bowl practices situation with them. And that was the spot that we were in 2009. Charlie Weiss had just been fired. We were were getting ready to go into a bowl game with the interim coach. And our leadership council was like, hey, like we're 6-6. We technically could be in a bowl game, but we think this time would be better served for the draft eligible guys to go get a start on training, for the guys that are going to be around here for the next staff to start to gear up for whatever that entails. And we decided not to go. That was a player voiced decision in that process. And it sounds like it was here. So for the people that are like, oh, these guys, it's one more chance for them to be together, or, these seniors didn't know they were playing their last game. Like, no, I'd imagine they all had a fair amount of agency in this decision. And so I as long as their voices were heard on that, the one logical gripe is, hey, if you're Marcus Freeman and the coaching staff, are you going to regret missing out on having 15 practices to develop the younger guys in this roster? Because really, in the non-BCS bowls, non-playoff bowls, that's what this turns into. Like, my favorite words when I was an older guy were young guy scrimmage, because you get the kind of time off in the beginning, and the young guys go out there and do 9-on-7 and live 11-on-11, and go get their taste of what's coming next for them. And in a hyper-competitive landscape where you're already limited in the time that you have on the field with these guys, will they come to regret that? I don't know. That, to me, is a legitimate question and wonder. Hey, as they're waking up today, tomorrow, the rest of this week, does the staff look at it that way? But from the player standpoint, you spend a lot of time with these guys, man. Like, bowl games were fun memories of different places that we were able to go get drunk, especially in the first few days of the week where there was no curfew and you got to go out and have a good time at whatever the bowl site was. But like, all the rest of the hand-wringing to me seems overwrought from a bunch of people that have a way different view on this time of year than I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy that they get to spend time with their families over the holidays. The 15 practices thing, I would love to talk to Marcus Freeman about that and ask if that is something that's overblown in this day and age, especially when the 15 practices, like you said, even with, Iowa State and Kansas State having, coaching changes, there's going to be a lot of players that go in the portal, I'm sure. But even for Notre Dame, having like a lot of your offense opting out of the game in the practices, like, is that even meaningful? Maybe for some players it is, but I think like the more meaningful impact of playing in the game would be if, God forbid, one of your star underclassmen players gets hurt, like a CJ Carr or a Leonard Moore, someone who has like legitimately millions of dollars on the line next season when they become draft eligible. That would be a lot worse than any other outcome to me. So if this is a risk reward thing purely, I just don't think the reward is there. And I think that in any other circumstances, Notre Dame probably does play in the game. But I think, like we heard from Pete Bevacqua, the way that this happens is you find out you're not in the playoff, and within an hour you have to accept a bowl bid. And they just didn't want to do it in the moment. And like you said, I hope they don't come to regret it a month from now. But it really just, to me, doesn't seem like the biggest indictment on Notre Dame or college football or bowl season or whatever that people are trying to make it out to be. I really just think it's one team opting out, and someone else, like you said, already took their spot. So we can still watch the Pop-Tart Bowl and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, it's like someone's going to show up and play it. You can love bowl season, but still be realistic about where we're at. And that's not a Notre Dame thing. That's the state of the modern playoff. It's what you just described as an often myopic discussion point on the playoff and nothing else in terms of what the outside world values in the sport. And so getting that as a result internally from teams who make, you're right, what is a macro decision that's been a micro issue for a while of player opt-outs in a bowl game. Like, that was a factor I thought of. Like, hey, players opt out all the time because they got money on the other side of the rainbow from this bowl game. If Notre Dame believes next year's roster is a national championship caliber roster, especially with the young guys on it, well, you're right. Like, you are risking injury in this in a way that, hey, if they're not available at the start of next season, that undermines that quest that I'm sure this team is as motivated as ever for, with the reinforcements coming their way. So it was a very interesting day digesting all that, to say the least. But again, I do think that's just a product of no one likes when people do things differently in a sport where things for a long time were the same.
I would also like to say, I think people have been saying, college football fans have been saying for years, like, the sport is broken and all of this is a mess. And then want every team to just continue business as usual. So I think that, like, from that standpoint, it's like, okay, like, if you agree that this is a problem and that there's way too much college football playoff discourse throughout the season, and like the networks and the broadcast should be focusing more on actual games and players and storylines and things like that, then you can't be mad when a team internalizes that and says, okay, well, playoff or bust, we're not in the playoff, we're not going to play. I just think that's like a natural outcome of all of this. So it would be hypocritical for me to say that, you know, this is a terrible decision and they're a bunch of losers for making it. If you think that Notre Dame's a bunch of losers, that's fine. You're probably not a Notre Dame fan. I don't care if you think they're a bunch of losers. I don't think they're losers for not playing in the Pop-Tart Bowl, but whatever. If that's your opinion, then that's okay.
Yeah, I think this is an excuse for people that already felt a certain way about Notre Dame to just feel that way louder and harder and feel justified, because all of you with your criticism, I know you're all the most competitive person that's ever existed. You are actually the alpha at the top of the pile, and I believe we should all try and emulate you a lot more and try and be like you in all those ways. So hopefully one day Marcus Freeman and this team can be as tough, determined, as competitive as honey bunches of letters 69.
Yeah, for sure. One other thing, I know that this is getting compared a lot to Florida State in 2023. Florida State got, snubbed from the playoff after being undefeated. Their quarterback got hurt. Alabama gets in. I think it's telling that the two most controversial playoff decisions in the last decade both involve Alabama getting in, but I digress. Florida State then got a Orange Bowl bid, played against Georgia. We know a lot of Florida State players opted out. They had NFL aspirations. Don't blame them for that. Georgia beat them like 63-3 or something like that. It was just an absolute blowout. And I just think comparing this to the Orange Bowl is a little insane. And I think if Florida State had just done this in 2023, yeah, maybe they get criticized. I'm sure they do, but not accepting a New Year's Six bowl bid versus the Pop-Tart Bowl, to me, kind of a different thing. And also I'd rather see, not that I think Notre Dame would just like not be competitive in a game, even with their backup players playing a lot of the starting roles. I think Notre Dame still would absolutely try to win the game. And Marcus Freeman, I think, hates losing more than he hates anything else. But like, I think that this is a good decision for all parties, because as a fan, you don't want to watch two teams play in a game where one team just doesn't want to be there. And we've seen that a lot in the last few years.
Have you seen that? I mean, how much of bowl season do we spend trying to game out who actually wants to be here? I mean, that was the excuse
Right.
when, teams from power conferences lost games to lesser teams outside of the New Year's Six for years. And now all of a sudden, someone kind of codifies that and everyone loses their mind. To me, again, just sort of misses the point with a lot of this. So, the one thing I will say relative to the Florida State conversation, I think the place where they lost a lot of people that I hope doesn't happen here is once we get to like a certain point after this, and I don't know when that is, but like once the calendar turns to 2026, like you got to stuff this and leave it. Like this can't be your personality and gripe going forward. If you're Marcus and the team, if you're a fan, you want to stay pissed off about this forever, by all means, like go with God. Life's too short. But for the players and the team, like this has to get put behind them, and it just has to become fuel for what happens next. But you can't have this be a talking point, being something you're going to bring up and become obsessed with that serves no one. That seems like sour grapes in a way that I think would be regrettable once you turn the calendar to 2026.
Right. Well, from that standpoint, like if this is a mental issue for the team, I think you have to trust that Marcus Freeman is the right coach to just set everyone right once the calendar does turn and they come back from the holidays for the spring semester. Like you said, Mike, like I don't really have any reason to believe that this is like some massive thing that will just cause like a team-wide mental breakdown, doom spiral. I don't see that happening with this head coach and with this team. And maybe I'm wrong, but I understand that as a fear that like this is something that could be a cloud over your head and like taint you going forward. Like the Florida State comparison is apt, because we've seen the last few seasons since they were snubbed from the playoff, things have not gone well for them. And there's a million reasons why that Notre Dame, frankly, has no comparison point to in that. Like Notre Dame, we probably won't talk about the early signing period today because we have already talked for a lot of about the playoffs, but Notre Dame signed a really, really good class. And I mean, there's going to be staff decisions to be made coming down the pipeline here. I don't know what those will be if Chris Ash stays for another season, Mike. I'm very curious about that. I obviously anticipate Mike Denbrock staying because he's on a 3-year deal, but there's a lot of things that are going to shake out from this. But if this comes down to like, oh man, this team is in a really bad mental headspace because they opted out of the Pop-Tart Bowl, like I don't see that outcome happening.
No, like you said, Marcus Freeman has earned the benefit of the doubt based on what we've seen from this team back-to-back years, where you want to talk about how they have responded to adversity. The last 2 years of tell you it's pretty darn good. So until further notice, I am going to give him that deference because he and that team have earned it up until this point. You guys have earned a break. That was a lot of information. We'll take a quick one here and come back and wrap up things on the Echoes. All right, welcome back at the Echoes ND Pod on all social media as we put a bow on this, and we'll still have podcasts coming out every week going forward here. For the most part, we'll have plenty of time to look ahead at recruiting, some of the other things that are coming down the pipeline, like Jess brought up, the staff decisions that could be pending for this team. But kind of a chance to say goodbye now. I mean, we just had him on last week, but there's a bunch of Notre Dame football players that did now unknowingly play the last game of their careers on the road against Stanford. And that includes our dear sweet baby, Jeremiah Love, who, hasn't announced anything yet as of the recording of this podcast, but would be stunned if he doesn't go embrace his future as a top 15 draft pick, making millions of dollars and doing a great job in the NFL. So just that part is always sad. Like, saying goodbye to players, especially in this day and age. People talk so much about the transient nature of college football. And I think Notre Dame has been so fortunate to have so many players that do stick around for multiple years, that you do get to know and watch grow and still have that relationship with. And so I know he's definitely one that I and Irish fans will all miss dearly.
Yeah, it's definitely the biggest bummer. And even as we just talked about with like the bowl opting out, he wasn't going to play in that, I would have to imagine anyways. So as soon as they found out that they weren't in the playoff, you kind of look back and you're like, wow, that Stanford game, that was really it. What a terrible ending on a awesome season. Just a absolutely empty state. This is, I don't want to relitigate, but hey, if Stanford, maybe if you sell out that game, Notre Dame gets a little bit of credit for winning it by 20 points. Instead, Alabama gets all the credit because Auburn actually has a fan base that sticks around for their end of season rival when they have 5 wins. But I digress. Everything is Stanford's fault. They're just so evil, Mike. I'm gonna miss Jeremiah Love, though. We'll definitely keep people abreast of all the opt-outs that we probably, or not the opt-outs, the NFL declarations we'll probably get over the next week. I imagine like Malachi Fields will be long gone. This was his 5th year. So yeah, just hugely disappointing that those are the last memories we'll have of some really special Notre Dame players. But if you're Jeremiah Love, there's absolutely no question the NFL is the right choice. I mean, getting to your first NFL contract so you could sign your second NFL contract is huge. Being the first projected running back off the board is something that you can't really turn up, even if Notre Dame did have the pure capital to retain him, which maybe they do. Is that even a good choice for your roster next season when you have so many other players? Like, these are the decisions that teams now have to make with star players like this. Go. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say you're right in that's the value prop that a lot of teams have to do right now. It's why Notre Dame, being a team that's signing robust high school classes, is important, because high school talent's always going to be cheaper than portal talent. We've kind of seen that borne out at this point. But with Jeremiah, like, I just think position-wise, this is so different. Like, there's part of me that would advise him to do that. As a running back, your best years are early. Your best chance is to get out there as young as you can. And like, to Jeremiah, has always been in a timeshare in that backfield, like goes in a great situation where it's not like, I went back and was looking at like Heisman numbers from Derrick Henry's season. The workload that Mark Ingram, some of these guys at other places that were, the feature back on an offense that was going to grind them to dust. You go to the NFL and Derrick Henry's a freak who's defied nature in so many ways at that level. But for the most part, like, what a win for Jeremiah, for Jadarian, both at that position where you're always working against your own body clock and the way the NFL views age at that spot. I don't think it's a decision for them, but to your point, in a lot of ways, that's the decision every roster is grappling with, especially because you have a quarterback who rightly could and should eat up a big portion of your number, considering Notre Dame returns to next season with a guy who's going to be a preseason Heisman favorite in CJ Carr.
Yeah, for sure. And the portal opens right after the new year, I believe, for college football players. Yes. I imagine we'll see some movement there. I can't exactly say who I think it will be, but it wouldn't surprise me to see some players move into the portal. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think the biggest upside to the season was CJ Carr. Going into the year, we didn't even know if he was going to be the starter. He finishes with a really impressive freshman career. From the first game, we were impressed with what we saw from him. And he certainly had his ups and his downs. I think he had a couple of pretty below average games in the mix. But I think in the offseason, we'll probably do a little bit more analysis of the season that he did have and why he just really exceeded all expectations for a freshman quarterback. And I think that's the biggest thing is like, going from losing your first 2 games to the 10-game winning streak ultimately didn't get you into the playoff, but I think it showed how much talent is really on this team and how they were able to, stay the course and be resilient and show that Notre Dame has the players to win a national championship. If they had made the field, they would have been the third highest favorite, probably tied with Texas Tech based on some of the reporting that I read to win the whole thing this year. So I think all the other teams should be really happy they didn't get in, and they probably are. But that's because of CJ Carr. It's because of Leonard Moore, who will be back. It's because of all of the players on this team that really showed the spectacular performances this season. So I really hate to eulogize the football team right now. Didn't think we'd be doing it on Monday, December 8th or Tuesday the 9th, whenever you listen to this, but still a bright future ahead and lots to look forward to once the dust settles on this college football season.
Yep. We get to root for some of our guys to go and start their NFL future. And you're right, in the coming weeks, like I was just looking up on Blue Gold, they had the list of seniors, including the guys that had another year of potential eligibility, and like names like Joshua Burnham, Donovan Hinish, Jadarian Price, Billy Schrouth, Jalen Sneed, Jabron Payne, Emil Wagner technically does as well. So there's a number of guys who I think will have a decision to make in a way that, for Jadarian, for Jeremiah, for some of these guys is going to be very easy. And then, what, to your point, what Notre Dame does in the portal period. I mean, they've done a really good job of going out there and finding impactful guys. Devonta Smith, when healthy this year, was a difference maker at nickel, the same way that Jordan Clark had been a year before at wide receiver. Yes,
Jalen Stroman having a really good second half to the season.
Yep.
That, which also reminds me, I've seen a lot of takes of like the younger players and the backups would have loved to play in the bowl game. Guys, we all saw them against Syracuse. Trust me, they got their moment in the sun this season at Notre Dame Stadium. We got to see a lot of second stringers in that game and third stringers and fourth stringers. But yes, Mike, to your point, I Notre Dame did a really good job in the portal this year. And better than last season, which was better than the season before that. So I'm really interested to see, especially now that there's not going to be a GM change in the new year, how Mike Martin continues to keep it rolling. I think we're going to try to get him on the show at some point to talk about all of this because he's a really interesting person to talk to. I had the pleasure of interviewing him earlier this year on campus. But hopefully with, I don't want to jinx anything because we did ask Pete Bevacqua about Marcus Freeman getting NFL interest, but hopefully with like a little bit continuity in that department too, this becomes another portal season where Notre Dame can really make a big impact.
I think that's a great place to kind of put a bow on this. Is you're right, Jess, as you're looking for last year, Notre Dame comes off a national championship appearance. You're coming in with a bunch of momentum, but you did have volatility in the offseason in terms of the recruiting and scouting department and the changes that happened there when Chad went to USC. And you did have important pieces like quarterback leave campus. Now you walk into this offseason, and Pete mentioned that word alignment. It does seem like in all the most important players in the organization for Notre Dame right now, you've got alignment, especially at quarterback, that's been hard to come by in the last decade plus for Notre Dame football, sans the Ian Book years where you had true consistency there. So you now walk into next year where CJ Carr, the expectations going to be in a totally different place, as they will be once again to start the year for this team. But for all the reasons that we mentioned, they seem really well positioned to go out and do just that. So we hope you guys stick around with us here in the coming weeks. Like we said, we'll have plenty more. We'll try and get some of our friends on as we get into the offseason, maybe go back and do some old game watches, certainly some position grading and breakdown from what we saw in this season and spinning forward into 2026. And like we said, getting to what's going on with the basketball programs right now, gearing up for lacrosse season, which is always near and dear to my heart.
There have been some great basketball developments in the last couple of weeks, so I'm very excited to talk about that at some point. But we will still be here even if the team is not playing football. So please don't unsubscribe. Please keep us in your feeds because there's still, even in the football offseason, we still have so much to talk about, Mike. But we will finally talk about the basketball teams next week.
Can't wait. Thank you guys, as always, for yapping with us. We appreciate it. Have a good weekend and go Irish.